At the beginning of the story, we see a man named Paul swimming in the ocean. Just then, he suddenly noticed strange bubbles appearing in the water, and looking up he was left astonished because the clouds in the sky were swirling in the shape of a mysterious circle. Paul did not even realize that the bubbles around him had already formed a circle, but a few moments later those bubbles suddenly disappeared. Paul found all of this a bit strange, but he did not think too much about it. After this, Paul reached home and played with his daughter Mia for a while. In the evening, his wife Alice also came home. Their family was very happy, but they had no idea that in the next few days their lives would change completely. In the coming days, Paul started feeling every day that his clothes were getting bigger day by day. When he told this to Alice, Alice said, "You are not getting thin." But Paul could not understand that even if he had lost weight, how could the length of his arms and legs decrease? Hearing this, his wife became a little worried that something serious might have happened to him. She told Paul to see a doctor quickly. Paul immediately agreed to this as well. The doctor did a complete checkup and measured his height, but when the doctor revealed that his height was now only 176 centimeters, Paul was very shocked. He said, "From my youth until now, I was 180 centimeters. How could I lose 4 centimeters? Then, the doctor asked a few more questions and concluded that perhaps this was the effect of advancing age. But Paul was not convinced of this at all. After this, when he went to work, he felt that his helmet kept sliding off his head repeatedly. At first, he thought he had accidentally picked up someone else's helmet, but when he looked inside and saw the name, it turned out to be his own. That night, Paul could not sleep, because his mind kept going back to those strange swirling clouds he had seen in the ocean. To tire himself out, he started exercising at midnight, but a little while later, Alice convinced him and brought him back to bed. After this, on May 20th, Paul was bathing in the morning when he felt that the shower seemed considerably higher than before. During this, his wedding ring suddenly slipped off his finger and fell down, and poor Paul started staring at his hand in astonishment. Then, when he reached the kitchen, Alice noticed another strange thing. Paul had become shorter than her too. This time, the matter started feeling more serious, so Paul went straight to the hospital, where the doctors performed various tests on him. He had a full body scan, blood tests were done, and other medical examinations were also carried out. But a few hours later, a doctor came and told him that all the reports came back completely normal. Just one thing turned out to be very shocking. Paul's height was now only 165 centimeters, and his weight had come down to just 63 kg, meaning in just a few weeks he had lost 15 centimeters and 10 kilograms. The biggest problem was that the doctor had never seen such a case in his entire career, and he had no scientific explanation for this strange phenomenon either. But he accepted the fact that Paul's body was continuously shrinking, and it was possible that this process would continue further. After this, Paul was put through more tests. But that blood-filled lab at the hospital, and that circle forming in the clouds, all of that started running through his mind 24 hours a day. Paul was now considerably more troubled than before. After another frightening dream, when Paul woke up at the hospital, he decided he was wasting his time there. So he left the hospital and came back home. But even after reaching home, his attention remained stuck on his decreasing height at all times. The situation reached a point where when he sat in a chair, his feet could not even reach the floor. Gradually, Paul started feeling that he was also drifting away from his family, and he started avoiding the phone calls coming from the hospital too. With time, his body became so small that the moment he sat in a chair, he looked like a little doll. Then, Alice thought they should leave this house now, and until some solution was found, it would be right to send Mia to her grandparents. But when she asked Paul where he wanted to go, Paul gave the opposite answer, saying he wanted to go to a circus. During this, the presence of Tofu was also starting to disturb him because the cat hovering around him all the time felt like some kind of danger. So Alice sent Tofu outside the house and locked the bedroom door. But by the time June 30th arrived, Paul's size had been reduced to about the size of a mobile phone. It was raining outside, and Tofu sat on the other side of the window, just staring at him. Well, a little while later, Alice brought some people inside to show the house who were actually potential buyers of the house. The moment Paul saw them, he panicked and ran to hide under the bed, where while hiding he realized that people were talking about buying and selling his house. Hearing this, his heart broke, and the moment the guests left, Paul started shouting at Alice in anger. He told Alice that she should have informed him first because if someone had seen him, it would have been a great danger. Apart from this, he was also irritated by the fact that Alice was making the decision to sell the house without asking him, whereas Alice kept reminding him that she had already brought this up in front of him before. Even so, Paul kept shouting that the house was only his. Then, Alice was forced to remind him that they had no money left. Now, she could not run this house alone, and Paul was also refusing to get treatment. She could not figure out how to help him. Hearing this from Alice, Paul's anger flared up even more. "Oh, come on. I'm not sick. My size is just decreasing. There's no other problem with me. And the doctors themselves said they can't understand what is happening to me." And finally, Alice's patience also broke. She shouted so loudly that the force of her voice almost knocked Paul off the counter. But the moment she realized her mistake, Alice apologized and went outside. When Paul looked toward the corridor, he realized that Mia had heard their entire argument. Well then, on July 5th, we see that Mia had sat Paul inside her dollhouse, and Paul also started keeping her company. He started praising the dollhouse as though it were a real house. He jokingly started saying, "This is the best investment I have ever made." Paul asked Mia to play some music so he could dance with the doll, and seeing this, Mia's smile returned to her face after many days. Seeing her papa joking around again made her very happy. She wanted to play that monster game with her papa like before, which they used to play often. But as soon as she tried to scare her father by pretending to be a monster, Paul genuinely got scared, because now his small body would get very frightened by loud sounds and big hand gestures. Seeing this, the smile disappeared from Mia's face because she immediately understood that she had unknowingly scared Paul, so she apologized sadly. Well, that night, Alice could not sleep, and when Paul came near the bed, Alice extended her hand toward him, and Paul climbed onto her hand and came close to her. Then by July 30th, Paul had become so small that he was barely a little bigger than a bottle cork. He was now making something with the help of a thread and a fishing hook. Meanwhile, their cat Tofu was repeatedly scratching the pet door from outside, and after considerable effort, it also managed to push the door open and come inside, which terrified Paul badly, and he accidentally fell on top of the fishing hook. That injury wounded his stomach. Still, he carefully pulled the hook out and took off his shirt to look at the wound. But there was no time to treat the wound because Tofu was ready to hunt him. Then, Paul picked up a needle and ran from there, and Tofu also chased after him. Paul wanted to escape through the dollhouse route, but Tofu jumped over him and came after him again. Then, Paul reached the basement door and tried to slide under it and hide, but Tofu put its paw under the door and struck Paul, which sent him tumbling down the stairs. Fortunately, he fell into a trash box that was below, but lost consciousness due to the injury. A little while later, Alice came home, and the moment her eyes fell on the blood-soaked shirt, she was frozen. Meanwhile, Paul regained consciousness and started calling Alice's name loudly. But a little while later, Alice came into the basement and kept looking around in all directions. Still, neither could she see Paul, nor could she hear his voice. Just then, Tofu also arrived there, and seeing its prey started making strange sounds, which made Alice turn toward it. She thought Tofu had eaten Paul, and she ran angrily toward Tofu, shouting toward the stairs. Poor Paul was finding it very frustrating to feel so helpless and alone like this. He started throwing things around in anger. Then, in the middle of the night, while waiting, he got tired and started finding ways to keep himself alive. First, he cut a piece of cloth to cover his body and tied a wire around himself like a belt. Then, looking around inside the box, he found a small opening in one corner, through which he came out. He picked up his needle and started moving toward the window. But just then, hearing the sound of something in the dark, he stopped completely. His heart started beating loudly. He climbed onto the water heater out of fear, but getting out through the window was not possible because it had a mosquito net on it. Then he saw that water was dripping from the pipe again. So taking the opportunity, Paul drank water from there and cleaned his body and wounds with it. But now moving forward in the dark frightened him very much. So Paul slept under that very water heater. The next morning, his eyes opened to Mia's voice calling him. But when he ran toward the stairs, they were so tall for him that he could not climb them at all. He also called Mia's name loudly, but his voice did not reach anyone. And just then, the sound came of the main door closing and the car starting. This clearly meant that his entire family had left the house. So poor Paul started looking for useful things around him. He finally found a piece of chalk with which he wrote his name there. Then he looked at the space between the furniture and the wall where some ants were eating a little cheese stuck in a mousetrap. Paul used his needle to shoo them away and tried to activate the mousetrap by dropping a nail on it. The first time, nothing happened. So he tried again, and this time, the trap snapped shut immediately, which meant he could now comfortably eat all the cheese. But just then, he spotted a spider from above, so Paul started hammering the nail against the wall repeatedly to make as much noise as possible, and frightened by the noise, the spider ran away from there. Well, after that, Paul tried to make a hole in another box with the help of the nail, but this time, there was no success. Then, he went back to the trash box and picked up a piece of cloth and a bottle cap. Then, filling the cap with water, he moistened the cloth and softened the cardboard. This time, when he struck with the nail, a hole was finally made, and Paul went inside where he saw a matchbox, but reaching it was not possible, because some heavy things were lying in between, which he could not even move. So he closed the hole with an eraser and tried to sleep, but a little while later, some sounds came from above, and then suddenly the lights went out. Paul started wondering who had now come into the house. Then, on July 15th, we see that Paul's sleep was broken by sounds coming from inside the house. Just then, he started shouting loudly and tried to attract people's attention by making noise with the nail and a paperclip. But a little while later, the basement door opened, and whoever was there just peeked once and closed the door again. Now, Paul understood that no one was coming to save him. Then, to take his mind off his pain, Paul started piercing the cork of a wine bottle with his needle, and after a little while, wine started dripping from the bottle. Now he comfortably sat down and had a few sips, but his small stomach could not even digest the wine, and he soon started vomiting. Meanwhile, his eyes fell on that same spider sitting on top of the fish tank, and in a drunken state he told Mia's doll that he would finish off this spider today. After that, Paul also climbed on top of the fish tank, and the spider looked at him for a few moments and ran away in fear. Paul started laughing loudly at this victory, but in this happiness his attention wandered. Just then, the spider came from behind and gave him such a tremendous push that he fell into the water. The moment he saw the fish, Paul swam to the surface of the water, but there he saw that the spider was waiting for him. Seeing this, poor Paul went back inside the water, and while swimming with the fish, waited for the spider to leave. Then a little while later, Paul put fish food in the fish tank and thought, let me test this. But its taste turned out so bad that he did not like it at all. That night, Paul was returning from the water heater with water in a bottle cap. Just then, he saw that the spider was waiting for him right there under the fish tank. The spider slowly started moving toward him, so Paul quickly took out his needle and tried to keep the spider away by spinning it around. He made several strikes at the spider's legs. Even then, the spider was not ready to back off. So Paul was forced to run and hide behind a leg of the furniture. But the spider immediately came after him, so Paul made several strikes again with the needle, which caused the spider to back off for a little while. The very next moment, the spider climbed up the wooden leg of the furniture and started attacking Paul from above. But Paul struck again and immediately ran from there. Now the cat and mouse game between the two started again, and while running, Paul got tangled in cables under the furniture and fell down. The spider immediately climbed on top of him, so Paul defended himself with all his strength, and just then, his eyes fell on a small piece of wood. He picked up that piece and struck it repeatedly on the spider's eyes, which finally made the spider back away from him. Then, when Paul shouted loudly at it, the spider ran away to hide in fear. After this, Paul, after considerable effort, finally managed to retrieve that matchbox, but his tiny body was not strong enough to easily light a match. A matchstick felt just like a torch to him. After many attempts, he finally managed to light one matchstick. Now Paul lit a small fire to keep himself warm, and then, while eating cheese, started talking to Mia's doll. He said he missed his family very much, and if that doll ever met Mia again, it should definitely pass along his message. In this way, days passed, and Paul exercised every day, ate cheese, and slept in that same box somehow, keeping himself alive. Then, on July 20th, suddenly he heard the sound of someone arriving, so he immediately ran toward the stairs and saw that a man was coming down into the basement. Paul started shouting loudly and waving his hands, trying to get his attention. But now he had become so small that even that man's voice and the sound of his footsteps seemed excessively loud and frightening to him. Panicking from the man's loud voice and the echo of his heavy footsteps, Paul covered both his ears with his hands and ran to hide behind the stairs. Such a sharp pain shot through his head that he sat down on the floor and started crying. But a little while later, when that man left, Paul slowly came outside. But upon coming out, he saw that the fish in the fish tank had now disappeared, meaning now he was truly left completely alone. Then on August 2nd, a mosquito came in through the basement window. That mosquito stared at Paul for a few moments, and just then, Paul realized that his size had now been reduced to nearly the size of an insect. When the mosquito flew away, an idea came to Paul's mind. He thought that perhaps he had become so small now that he could pass through the gaps of the mosquito net on the window, and thinking this, he started climbing up the furniture. Because of his very small height, it took him considerable time and effort to reach the top, but he finally reached the very top. Then, he ran at full speed and jumped and landed on some bricks placed ahead and started moving toward the window along the wall. On the way, he came face to face with a spider web, which told him the spiders still lived there. Paul tried to walk very carefully so the web would not shake, but accidentally his elbow touched the web, and that was enough. The spider immediately ran toward him. Paul lowered his head in fear because now he understood that his final moment had arrived. "I will die right here." He started crying out of fear and got so frightened that even his pants got wet. The spider kept looking at him in surprise for a few moments, but just then, a fly got itself trapped in its web. Now the spider immediately left Paul and ran toward its web to eat the fly. Taking advantage of this very opportunity, Paul started moving forward and after considerable effort finally reached the window. But when he tried to pass through the gaps of the mosquito net, he found that his body was still too big to get out through it. Well then, on August 7th, Paul's eyes opened when an ant started biting his leg. Paul kicked it, and the ant ran away. But the very next moment, the spider hunted it. Just then, another ant came out from between the mosquito net, and since Paul's size was now just as small, he could easily come out following it. Seizing the opportunity, he immediately came out and escaped from the spider just in time. Then, both of them just looked at each other for a few moments. Paul was thinking, would the spider now feel alone inside without him? Well, now he started wandering around here and there under the open sky. Even the grass was no less than a jungle for him. Even a drop of water was very large for him. Just then, suddenly, a beautiful butterfly came before his eyes, and the gentle breeze of its wings touched Paul's face. They both looked at each other for a few moments. Then the butterfly flew away into the distance. After this, Paul started remembering his daughter while looking at the stars shining in the sky. He had come to understand that he had no more place in the human world now, and gradually becoming smaller and smaller in size, he would perhaps just become a grain of dust. That's it for today. Hope you enjoyed. Like the video, subscribe to Cinema Recap, hit the bell icon, and let me know your thoughts on the movie in the comments section.